Chapter 4 Lies. Hermione! The small girl groaned, lifting her head slowly off the desk. She hadn't gotten much sleep the previous night. Her head had been buzzing with 1,000 different thoughts and feelings after her peculiar evening. Ron? Harry? She croaked, rubbing her eyes sleepily as they adjusted to the light. What's up? Ron researched her face, his nose crinkling in displeasure. You look awful, Miney, he said, and Harry mentally face-palmed. What happened? The girl scowled, her cheeks flushing red in humiliation. Thanks, Ronald. Although it hadn't been the best idea to point it out, Ron wasn't exactly incorrect. There were rather sizable bags hanging underneath the girl's eyes, which in turn were droopy and bloodshot. Ron winced at her hard stare, running a hand along the back of his neck. No, I just mean... What Ron is trying to say is that you look tired, Harry cut in, rolling his eyes. But anyway, that's beside the point. He looked upon the girl with a note of suspicion. Where were you last night? She blinked. Oh, Hermione felt her stomach tighten. She wasn't sure why. She'd known the question would eventually arise. But what the hell was she supposed to say? Oh, sorry guys, I was flying around the grounds on the back of Draco Malfoy's broomstick. What makes you ask? She finally managed to say, buying herself some time to think up a believable excuse. We didn't see you at all after dinner, and Pavati said you weren't in bed after curfew. He replied, watching carefully as Hermione went slightly pale. Is that so? She mumbled. Harry's eyebrow rose slightly as she glanced around the classroom, looking desperately for some sort of inspiration. Well, you see... She was with me, drawled a low, smooth voice from the doorway. Harry and Ron spun around simultaneously to find themselves face to face with Malfoy. He was wearing his usual black jacket and jeans, as well as a rather large smirk. After a moment of bewildered silence, Harry finally spoke out. What do you mean she was with you? Harry frowned. Draco's slim face tilted to the side as his gaze alternated between Ron, Harry, and a horrified Hermione. It's pretty self-explanatory, Potter, Draco sneered, rolling his eyes. I mean, she was with me. Harry muttered something under his breath. And what exactly were you doing? Ron cut in bitterly, causing Draco's dark glare to fall on him instead. He greeted the confused boy with a snide laugh, shaking his head. I asked her for some extra tutoring time, he said, shrugging. That's all. Harry processed the new information, trying unsuccessfully to find a flaw in his response. Is this true? Harry finally asked, turning to Hermione. Hermione was lost for words. She stood with her mouth hanging open, trying to wrap her head around what was happening. Yes, she said with a weak smile. Harry didn't look convinced, but he trusted that Hermione wouldn't lie and gave her a slight nod. Ron, however, was not done just yet. Why so late? He exclaimed, glaring at Malfoy. Why so nosy? Draco shot back. So you were just studying, that's it, Harry quickly added. Something didn't seem to be adding up, from the strange little smirks Draco kept giving Hermione to the way she was refusing any sort of eye contact. What the hell do you think we were doing? Flying around on broomsticks? Draco laughed almost too loudly. Hermione instantly reddened at Draco's comment. Idiot, idiot, idiot. Well, if you knew anything about Hermione, you'd know she hates flying, Ron hissed. So get your facts straight before you start making stupid jokes. Draco shrugged. I'm sure she'd enjoy it with the right mentor, he spoke, and his cold stare fell on her once more. In fact, I'm almost positive. Hermione couldn't bear to meet his gaze, let alone Harry's or Ron's. All she wanted was for the floor to swallow her up, or at least for Malfoy to go away. Right. Well, you can leave now. You've made your point, Harry said shortly. Just having a conversation with Malfoy was exhausting, and he was keen to end it. Draco smiled sarcastically, glancing at Hermione briefly before exiting the room with a swift turn. God, I hate that bloke, Ron muttered. Hermione wandered aimlessly down the hall towards the common room, her brow furrowed deeply in thought. It was the end of the day, but the long walk back from an evening of studying was much less satisfying than usual. It was as if everything had gone back to front. Malfoy was backing her up, and Ron and Harry didn't believe her. It felt bizarre. With a sense of thoughtfulness, she instead planned to find Draco and thank him briefly. Although she had no intention of becoming his friend, he did save her from a stern lecturing earlier. Hermione hurried back down the main entrance to the Great Hall, and to her luck, she spotted the blonde Slytherin striding towards the stairway that led to the dungeons. She followed him for a while, deciding how to approach the awkward conversation before finally calling his name. "Malfoy!" she shouted, watching him turn his head swiftly. "Wait a moment!" His expression was just as blank as always, but his lip began to curl into a snarl as he spotted her. "Can I help you?" "Well, I suppose," she said, her chin slightly raised as if to hold up her dignity. "I just wanted to say," she paused, and the boy raised an eyebrow. "Thank you." Draco looked baffled. And why on earth would that be? Now it was Hermione's turn to frown. "For earlier," she replied slowly. "You know, when you covered up for me?" Draco's face spread into a snarky smirk as he realized what she was implying. "Oh, Granger," he snarled. "You really think I was doing that for you? The only reason I said anything was to save myself from being socially damaged." Hermione froze in shock. Was he serious? She'd come to him to say thank you, and that's how he replied? The girl felt herself boiling over in rage, a mixture of embarrassment and hatred quivering in her voice. "You know what? Forget I said anything, ferret boy," she hissed, turning on her heel. "I didn't care anyway." Draco watched as she left silently. He didn't like that it felt wrong to let her walk away. Why did it feel wrong? It had all been a mistake. He'd planned the previous evening with the harmless intention of proving a point, but the outcome hadn't been what he expected. Suddenly, he was fighting with Granger again, but this time something was different. Hermione was fiercer than ever, but she'd also apologized, and they'd even managed to joke around without clawing each other's eyes out. It was all a bit too comfortable and new, like things were changing, and Draco didn't like change.